Hey, I'm Tracy Ragan, and I would like to talk to you about SBOMs, and in particular, using Syft to generate SBOMs. All right, so what I'm going to cover in this short 10-minute presentation is encourage you to start generating SBOMs, first of all, how to use Syft to get the job done, and what it looks like when we consume the data. But first, let me just introduce Ortelius, as it plays a primary role in this discussion. Ortelius is an evidence catalog. It collects and aggregates the DevOps and security data that you generate across your pipeline. It's an incubating project under the governance of the CD Foundation, and we are really about simplifying the adoption of microservices and improving security in your software. Again, I'm Tracy Ragan. I am the CEO and co-founder of DeployHub. I have served on many of the open source boards, including the OpenSSF, the CD Foundation. I'm currently serving on the CD Foundation's Technology Oversight Committee. And yes, I served on the Eclipse Foundation for years, way back when. I'm also the organizer for the Ortelius community, and I co-founded OpenMake Software back in 1995 with Steve Taylor. So let's just think about what the problem is here in terms of a modern architecture, a Kubernetes microservice architecture in particular. SBOM data is a problem in many cases, but when we move into a microservice architecture, it becomes more of a problem. And that problem is the data becomes siloed. So every time you build a container, that container ends up having its own SBOM, its own CVE reports, its own release versions, its own need for change tracking and impact analysis. All that is siloed in these individual containers. We don't have a good federated view of the data. Ortelius federates that data. Now, according to McKinsey & Company, and some surveys they have done, 65 to 80% of companies claim that they're seeking more visibility into application security logs. This Ortelius answers that question. How do we get them out of a log and into a dashboard and into a data store or an evidence store that we can actually act on the information? So what Ortelius does is it reads the data that comes from the pipeline. It captures the data for actionable insights and continuously exposes these non-compliant services to improve application security. And it helps with site reliability quite a bit too. So yes, getting started generating SBOMs is a critical piece of solving or hardening our cybersecurity around our software. SBOMs report critical understandings about your software supply chain, not just the dependencies, but things that you need to report to now, in particular, say, for example, government. And without an SBOM, you have very little understanding about what your software supply chain looks like, because you don't see any of those lower level dependencies, those transitive dependencies. And it's oftentimes very hard to really identify what you're consuming if you don't have a way to see it. So SBOMs solve that problem. And just as a kind of a summary of what they give you a list of your dependencies. They tell you what license that they use. They can tell you where it came from, the all-important provenance, and the version information. And with this information, you could derive CVEs with a more comprehensive understanding of any issues in a particular artifact. Now, keep in mind, all this is point-based. We have one container that we're getting CVEs for, one container's SBOM. We're not creating in one SBOM a comprehensive, sweeping organizational view of the supply chain. That's what the evidence catalog does. So let's get to it, using Syft. So Syft is a popular SBOM generation tool from Encore that uses the Cyclone-DX format. It's a CLI tool and Go library for generating software bill of materials from container images and file systems. It does not consume them, it creates the data. So Ortelius then can use Syft to add the SBOM generation and collect lower level dependency data to add to its aggregation engine and its versioning engine. So let's just talk about quickly how easy it is to add Syft to your pipeline with Ortelius. So first, here's some sample code that shows how we've done it. Initially, we go ahead and install Syft as part of the process. Then we call Syft to create the SBOM, and then we capture the display of the SBOM. The next thing to do is pass the name of the SBOM over to Ortelius. So you would execute some DH commands, this update comp, which is for component, to bring that information, that SBOM information, up into Ortelius. Now the results is you have a dashboard that shows the component information based on the SBOM for that particular component of the point problem that we all are now aware of. What Ortelius does is it goes a step farther. It says, hey, I can start aggregating this data up to the application level. So if the application team is using Ortelius and they've defined what their subcomponents are, Ortelius can now go and say, I'm going to bring all of the subcomponent SBOMs up to the application level and provide you a view at the application level. The next thing it can do is it can leverage that information. It can take that information and it can start building a profile of your organization's security levels. So, for example, it can say, you can go and say, hey, show me where Log4j is being used. And it can produce a report that says, these are the applications that are consuming it. You could also do it on an environment level and say, show me for production where Log4j is running. So now we're starting to think about taking that lower level SBOM security data, pipeline information, where something's been deployed, and connect that information together and start aggregating the data up so it can be actionable. So while most of us are probably aware of the benefits of generating an SBOM, some of us may not do it because we're not doing anything with the data. In fact, the Biden administration is now requiring SBOMs as part of contracts with the government, but there's some industry lobbyists who are pushing back on that and saying, why are you making us do that if you're not consuming it? Ortelius is about consuming the data and making the data actionable. So by integrating Syft with Ortelius, you immediately begin putting the SBOM data to work, making the SBOMs the basis for viewing and acting upon your resulting security profile. So I hope that was helpful in understanding the SBOM problem, especially in a decoupled environment. And please, if you are not already a contributor, become a contributor of Ortelius. Even having your voice at the table as an end user saying these are the problems we're having is super, super helpful. And if you have never joined an open source community, you can really help. It can really help improve not only your own personal branding around blogs or presentations you might do, but if you're coding, you can learn about microservices, you can learn about blockchain, and soon you'll be able to learn about something called Porous, which is a universal repo or an extension to an OCI registry. So thank you, and hope you learned something.